Today is the 1 year anniversary of the How Can I Help tweet. December 4th of last year, a lot of what is known as the sort of IPO moment of Miami Tech started. And I never would have guessed in a million years, Gavin, that that we would be here. If you would have told me on December 3rd, the day before, like, hey, this is what's going to happen tomorrow. Miami is going to go from trying to create a tech ecosystem, which we were fighting really hard and trying to develop it, to this sort of IPO moment where, in a year, we're going to be number one in the nation for tech job growth, number one in the nation for tech job migration, move the $1 trillion of assets under management companies to Miami. Met you and your sort of co-creators of Ethereum and to be talking on the 1 year anniversary about Polkadot, which is an incredible technology that you've developed. I would have said there's absolutely no way in the world that all that's going to happen. So how does that happen? I guess that's my first question to you. How does that? You've lived a phenomenal and incredibly interesting life. How do these viral moments happen? How does this happen?
I think in economics there's this thing called like a Schelling point.
Yeah.
Where basically, it's like a crystallization point, and it's all it needs is this very initial
catalytic moment or whatever.
Yeah, and then suddenly everything was just waiting for it. It's like the universe was just waiting for this one thing.
Yeah, they call it the Big Bang. I think when at least when the universe got started. So that's absolutely right. So take us through. There are rumors that Ethereum was at least conceived, or some early moments in Miami. You were there. Tell us a little bit about how it happened, who were the main drivers, and obviously your evolution from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is about 8 years ago now, almost 8 years. It was January 2014.
Feels like a lifetime ago, right?
It really does. It really, really does.
If this week feels like a long time, I can't even imagine what 8 years feels like.
Crazy. So we had this villa on Miami Beach.
Yeah.
This is where I met Vitalik for the first time, in person, and it was a weird. As someone who grew up in the rural northwest of England, I stayed in the north of England for most of my life. Like I only left when I was about 26.
Yeah.
Coming to this, and Miami was crazy at this time, right? Yeah. Miami was it was right before the Bitcoin meetup. It was all Bitcoin then, not blockchain. Right?
Sure.
It was like pre-blockchain concept. So it was like Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin. I can't remember Bitcoin Miami, I guess.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin had just reached an all-time high of like $1,000.
Yeah.
And everyone was feeling very flush.
Yeah, of course.
So the parties were pretty crazy. Ice sculptures, girls in gold paint, like nuts.
The parties are still crazy.
Yeah. For me, it was like looking into a whole different life.
It felt like almost like a metaverse, right? Obviously you started with Ethereum. You've developed Polkadot, which is an incredibly powerful blockchain technology. Talk to us about how you went in that direction and what your view of blockchain is. I think, like you said, you made a good point. We talk a lot about Bitcoin. We talk a lot about, which is, look, it's one of the most prevalent blockchain technologies that are out there, if not the most prevalent, the most common, and the one that's empowered a ton of people. But blockchain is a technology that not only helps drive Bitcoin, but can drive a ton of other applications. So talk to us about why you conceived the Polkadot and what it is, and how is blockchain going to really influence the world?
Sure. So, it began with Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the original use of the blockchain technology. It didn't used to be one word. In the original Bitcoin white paper, it's 2 words, blockchain, because it was a chain of blocks.
Right.
Each block is a bunch of transactions.
Sure.
And then they're chained together, they're linked together using this cryptographic mechanism, basically. It's resistant to like corruption.
Yeah, so math intensive, so that it can't be corrupted, changed.
Exactly.
It's immutable.
Immutable, right. So, and you have this immutable data structure. It's data because it's information, right? Immutable data structure. So it allows transactions to be added but never to be removed. And you could be very, very sure about this,
Right.
because there's like underlying mathematics that sort of make it impossible, not like expensive, but actually impossible
To undo.
as far as we know so far, to undo. But it's not just about transferring money between each other very cheaply and speedily, and with very high guarantees,
Right.
that no
Right,
one's
exactly.
creating money out of nowhere or anything like this. But it's about transacting in general. Business is about transacting, right? Not all deals involve money. Some deals are trades of kind, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's like, hey, you owe me a favor, but let's not think about it right now.
Right.
Value isn't just about strict currency. And so, when I came to the blockchain, as it's now known, it was Bitcoin back then, I was looking into the world of Ethereum, and I was seeing that this was doing something beyond just currency, right? It wasn't just about like, hey, here's $10, give me 11 back at some point in the future.
Right.
This was like a whole new way of thinking about how we can interact with each other when we don't necessarily know each other very well, so we don't trust each other.
Sure.
But we can interact with each other on an economic basis, separate to cash, separate to currency.
You said a word that I think is critical, so critical, and it's a word that we don't talk about in the context of this enough, which is trust, right? So why I think a lot of this is working so well is because it creates a layer of trust. It creates, among people who may not otherwise have that relationship, right? When you look at what's going on with central banks, with monetary policy and fiscal policy, and you see how that impacts people at the end of the day, right? It erodes trust. So when people say, hey, what backs Bitcoin? Well, what I think backs Bitcoin more than anything is trust. Frankly, there's trust in the set of rules, like you said, that are open, that are examinable, that are that can be changed by a community in a transparent way. When you talk about blockchain, right? Because I want to focus on blockchain. It's a ledger system. It's transparent as well. It's immutable, like you said. It can't be changed. What are the applications that you see on Polkadot? And talk to us about how you developed Polkadot. What was your mind frame with that?
Yeah, I want to jump back to the trust thing. I think it's
okay.
super
Go for
important
it.
that you bring this up.
Yeah.
It's like I look at trust a bit differently.
Yeah.
For me, trust is like one end of a spectrum, and for me, it's like synonymous with faith, right? Like blind faith, faith that you are a good person. It's like, I trust you to be a good person. Now, I don't have faith that the rain is going to make me wet, right? Because I know it's going to make me wet.
Right.
Like it's a self-evident
It's a
fact, right?
Yeah.
It's a truth. So for me, the other end of the spectrum, you got trust on one end, you got truth on the other end, right? I don't trust the rain to make me wet.
Right.
I don't trust Bitcoin to stay in my account
That's
until I spend it.
Yeah.
I know it's going to stay in my account until I spend it. I don't need to trust, because
That's a
it's
very,
not like there's
very
someone
interesting
to
dynamic. Yeah, explanation. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, so what you're saying is that it's a fact as opposed to a belief.
Correct.
Right? And I think that also is transcendent, right? Like, whereas in the transactional world, we're doing a lot of things on belief, right? Like we believe it's going to happen. Now you know it's going to happen. And I think that differential is one that can create a gap, right? Or fill a gap that I think sometimes the sort of the fiat world has created. But coming back to blockchain and Polkadot, talk to us about why Polkadot, how is it different? What was your vision?
Well, it started off back in 2016. This was right after the DAO, right? If you remember that.
Yeah.
The DOA.
Right.
And we were thinking about Ethereum too. This is like me and my team.
Right.
Back then we were an Ethereum shop, so
Yep.
we wrote Ethereum, tools, Ethereum client, all
Sure.
that stuff. And we really wanted to do something really like next generation.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking like next generation, what we're talking about like generality, we're talking about scalability.
Right.
right? We're talking about developability. We're talking about like flexibility.
Costs, I would imagine too.
Yeah, driving costs
Right,
down,
right.
driving transaction volume.
Energy issues, possibly.
Yeah, also, yeah, very much so actually. Proof of work was something that was with Ethereum 1 and Bitcoin. So we really wanted to make it something greener, something leaner, but at a really fundamental level, bringing in a lot of new technology, something upgradable, right? Something that can be changed at a time easily, not like Bitcoin with hard forks and Ethereum with hard forks, where it takes a huge amount of effort and consensus among the community.
Right.
So, there was this idea of like sharding, right? Which is basically where you have a workload, you break it up into separate parallel workloads that you can do independently and then bring them all together to like have them all be checked under the same conditions.
Right.
But the work itself is being done separately, which means you can like multiply up how many you're doing. It's a little bit like a manager who has 100 different people to do the work for them. And then they all bring it back to the desk at the end of the day, and the manager collates it together and I don't know, sends it off wherever it needs to go. So this is really what we wanted to achieve with Polkadot. But when we were thinking about how to achieve it, we figured, well, what if each of these individuals that are doing the work that the managers handed the work off to, what if they were like, what if there were specialists in their own domain? What if you got one that's like a medical guy and one that's like, I don't know, a finance guy?
Right.
Now suddenly you can do the work much faster, much better, because your individual workers are specialized to the work that they're doing. Exactly. This is separate to Ethereum, or basically it's a smart contract platform, which basically means all the workers are kind of like lawyers, right? They understand how to interpret legal text, but they're not very good at like interpreting medicine. They're not very good at interpreting, I don't know, finance or whatever else, right? Jack of all trades, master of none. So this is where we got to, and we figured let's run with this. We're not going to develop Ethereum 2. That's its own thing. We're going to develop something that is different. That we hope is going to be even better, and that's really where Polkadot came from.
It's amazing. So talk to us a little bit about what you see as the future of decentralization, the future of sort of technology. I feel like this week in Miami, I know that you participated in a lot of the stuff that's happening here. We as a city, we've taken, I think the year that culminates in today, it's incredible. It's almost like, to me, it's sort of like a godfidence that like the last day essentially of Basel is the day of the anniversary of the December 4th tweet. It's just incredible. But it feels to me, someone who's hasn't slept much in the last few days. It feels like there's something transcendent going on here. Like it's something that's bigger than just. It's bigger than just growing an ecosystem. It's bigger than just being the David and Goliath stories and sort of having a great year. It feels like the world is changing fundamentally. Mm-hmm. And there are some technologies that were, sort of like in the Industrial Revolution, right? That we're at this inflection point where some of these technologies that we've been talking about and thinking about are actually becoming reality and are changing our reality in many ways. How do you see that? How do you see Polkadot playing a role in that? And in our world and in technology, where we're futurists. I keep thinking we're futurists. We're trying to always predict the future, and then based on that prediction, we're trying to prepare ourselves for the future. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, decentralization is I think going to be a really important trend that we're going to see, both in technology and in society in general. Right? I think it's one of the few ways how we can guarantee that our expectations are met. And I mean this in a very general sense of the word.
Right.
Banking crisis 2008, expectations were not met. And what were these expectations? Well, they were, in some sense, the expectations of the regulators on the banking industry. But in another way, they were the expectations of society on the regulators, right? This is something that I see as endemic within our modern world. And it's endemic because the power structures within our modern world are opaque. Now, these power structures, this opaqueness of the power structures was fine in the smaller world pre-globalization.
Right.
But as the power structures got bigger and bigger and bigger, we see mega corporations, we see massive amounts of internationalism, we see increasingly powerful countries exerting global influence. These opaque power structures are beginning to become very dangerous, like problematic,
Sure.
simply because they place power in unchecked power to a large extent in the hands of very few. Decentralization is essentially a way of ensuring that that power doesn't go unchecked. It has the same checks and balances, broadly speaking, in line with the Constitution of the US.
And that they're followed.
Indeed, that
Right.
they're enforced,
Sure.
right? At every step of the way. And it's only by having these checks and balances, having the rules be transparent, and having the credible expectation that they're enforced, that we're going to be able to build a sensible rules-based order, not unlike the rules-based order that we're used to, the post-war, last 70 years rules-based order that we're used to. So I see this this technology, decentralization being a big part of it, as being a cornerstone of a way for society to maintain this post-war rules-based international world order. And I don't see it happening really any other way. We look at the existing power structures, we look at the UN, we look at the rise of China, we look at the the big game, and things are breaking down as expectations are not being met. The rules of the game are changing. Something is going to give unless we can set up some new way of ensuring that internationally, on a global basis, we do continue to have some sort of rules-based order. So I see decentralization and I see the technology that we are developing every day as being a way of doing that. And this comes with a really important caveat. If we start watering down the decentralization, right? If we start watering down the openness and transparency of the underlying technology,
The same.
we're going to fall into the same pit that we have
course.
done in the past. So decentralization is crucial if we want to retain this rules-based order that has given us all so much in the last 70 years, that has provided for all of this amazing development of civilization.
So here's my last question to you, and then we'll wrap it up. How do you see Miami right now? How's this Basel been in terms of the NFTs and just sort of blockchain applications? I feel like a lot of it has been blockchain application focused in terms of the events that we've seen. What's your take on this moment? I mean, we met here, and you're a man of your word. Let me tell you, he's a man of his word, because we met and I said, hey, I want to have you on, remember? And he said, I'll do it. And he's here. And on the anniversary of the How Can I Help campaign. So I really appreciate that. But how do you feel about Miami right now?
I think it's got some great leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I see it as very one of these American dream style, super optimistic cities. I come here, I'm like, people are saying, oh, do you live here? I'm like, well, I live between a few places. They're like, you're going to move here, you're going to buy some property here, you should come. It's people here are very loyal to the city, and that kind of loyalty is usually well deserved. There's usually something behind it, right? People are taking a lot of pride in being here. So Art Basel here, Art Miami, it was all super interesting. But the thing that shines through is how much the residents of Miami are proud of where they live.
Listen, that's a great way to end. Guys, check out Polkadot. It looks like it's certainly well led and well conceived, and it's going to change the world. Thanks, brother.
Cheers, man.
Thanks a lot.